November 18th, 1978. Somewhere deep inside the jungles of Guyana, a mother stood in line holding her child. Around her stood hundreds of other people. Families, teachers, nurses, grandparents, ordinary people. The kind of people you pass every day without noticing. Within hours, more than 900 of them would be dead. Not because they were attacked, not because they were trapped in a war, not because a disease swept through the camp, but because they followed an idea so powerful that it convinced ordinary people to do something almost impossible to understand. And for decades, the world has asked the same question. How? How do hundreds of ordinary people end up following a man into the jungle, and eventually toward death? Most people think they already know the answer. It was a cult. But that explanation creates a dangerous illusion. Because cults don't begin with poison, they begin with promises. And that's where our story starts. Hi, this is Motive Guru, where we uncover the psychology behind history's most significant events. Let's begin. To understand Jim Jones, you first have to understand America. The year is 1955. The country is wealthy, powerful, optimistic, at least on the surface. Beneath that surface, racial tensions are everywhere. The civil rights movement is gaining momentum. Millions of people feel ignored, left behind, disconnected, and whenever enough people feel lost, someone eventually appears with answers. That someone was Jim Jones. At first glance, he didn't look dangerous, he looked inspiring. He preached racial equality, he helped poor families, he organized food drives, he visited nursing homes, he talked about building a better future. And unlike many people who talk about helping others, he actually seemed to do it. People admired him, some even loved him, which raised our first question. If Jim Jones became one of the history's most infamous cult leaders, why did so many intelligent people trust him? Decades before social media existed, psychologist Abraham Maslow proposed something simple but profound. Human beings don't just need food, or shelter, or safety, they also need belonging. They need a tribe, a community, a place where they feel accepted. And for many people, Jim Jones was offering exactly that. Think about today. Why do people spend hours in online communities? Why do some people defend influencers they've never met? Why do political groups often feel more like identities than opinions? Because belonging is powerful. When people feel seen, they become emotionally invested. And Jim Jones had an extraordinary ability to make people feel seen. For many followers, joining his church didn't feel like joining a religion. It feels like finally finding a family. But families create trust, and trust creates influence. The question is, what happens when that influence starts growing? At first, Jim Jones didn't ask people to surrender everything on day one. That would have failed immediately. Instead, he asked for something much smaller. Attend one more meeting, volunteer a few more hours, help someone in need, donate a little money, support the mission. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. Most people were happy to do it. After all, they believed they were helping create a better world. But then the requests grew. More meetings, more donations, more time, more loyalty. Some followers signed over property, others gave away large portions of their income. Some began spending nearly every free hour working for the church. And something strange happened. The more they sacrificed, the harder it became to walk away. Why? Years before Jonestown existed, psychologist Leon Festinger noticed something fascinating. When people invest heavily in a belief, they often become more loyal to it, not less. Even when warning signs appear. Imagine you're a single mother. You join a community because it gives your children friends. You spend years there. You donate money. You build relationships. You defend the group against critics. Then one day someone tells you, maybe this entire movement is built on lies. At that moment, you're not questioning a leader, you're questioning years of your life. And that's painful. Painful enough that many people protect the belief instead. Not because they're stupid, because they are human. And every sacrifice makes doubt more expensive. Today we still see this everywhere. People stay in toxic relationships. Investors refuse to admit bad decisions. Fans defend public figures despite overwhelming evidence. The followers of Jim Jones weren't trapped by chains, they were trapped by commitment. But Jim Jones wanted something even bigger. Much bigger. He didn't just wanted followers, he wanted believers. People willing to build a completely new society. A paradise. And soon, he would ask them to do something that sounds impossible. Leave their home, leave their career, leave the America, and follow him into the jungle. The shocking part, hundreds agreed. The real question is, why? At first, the idea sounded ridiculous. Leave America? Move to a jungle? Start over from nothing? Most people would never consider it. But Jim Jones wasn't selling a jungle. He was selling an escape. And that's an important difference. Because people rarely abandon their lives for what they are running toward, they abandon them for what they are trying to leave behind. By the early 1970s, Jim Jones had become increasingly obsessed with a frightening belief. He claimed powerful enemies were coming. The government, the media, the intelligence agencies. Everyone, he said, wanted to destroy the movement. To outsiders, these claims sound paranoid. To followers, they sound believable. Because trust had already been built. And once trust exists, people often evaluate information differently. If a stranger tells you the world is ending, you laugh. If someone you trust tells you, you listen. And if that person spent years helping you, you may believe them. Jim Jones presented himself as a protector, a man preparing his people for danger, and then he offered a solution. A place called Jonestown, deep inside the jungles of Guyana, far away from corruptions, far away from racism, far away from capitalism. A place where everyone would work together, share resources, and build a new society. A paradise. At least, that was the promise, which raised an important question. Why did so many people believe paradise was possible? History is filled with movements built around the vision of a better future. Religions, political revolutions, national movements, social causes, again and again. People willing to sacrifice comfort today for a promised tomorrow. Psychologist Viktor Frankl observed something powerful. Human beings can endure extraordinary hardship if they believe it serves a meaningful purpose. Meaning makes sacrifice feel worthwhile. And Jim Jones gave his followers meaning. They weren't moving to Guyana because they loved jungle. They were moving because they believed they were building history. A better world. A fairer world. A world future generation would thank them for creating. And when people believe they are part of something larger than themselves, they become capable of remarkable commitment. Today we still see this. Startup founders sleeping in offices. Activists dedicating years to causes. Online communities united around a shared mission. Meaning can inspire extraordinary achievements. But meaning can also blind people to danger. And danger was already waiting in Jonestown. The brochures looked beautiful. Photographs showed smiling families, green fields, happy workers, children playing. Everything appeared hopeful, but reality was different. The jungle was unforgiving. The heat was intense. The work was exhausting. Food shortage became common. Privacy disappeared. Many people found themselves trapped in a reality far harsher than what had been promised. Some began to have doubts. Some wanted to leave. And that's where the story became much darker. Because living wasn't as simple as walking away. Jim Jones controlled information. Letters were monitored. Conversations were watched. Criticism became dangerous. And slowly, the dream started becoming a prison, which raised another question. If people realized something was wrong, why didn't they leave? Years earlier, psychologist Henry Touchfield made an unsettling discovery. People don't simply join groups. Over time, groups become part of who they are. A sport team, a religion, a political movement, an online community, an ideology. The boundary between I believe this and this is who I am slowly disappears. And once that happens, leaving the group feels like losing yourself. Imagine moving thousands of miles away, leaving your home, selling your possessions, convincing your family this was the right decision. Now imagine admitting it was all a mistake. It's not just embarrassing, it's devastating. Because if Jonestown failed, what did that say about the years they had invested? What did it say about their judgment, their identity, their purpose? For many followers, remaining loyal becomes psychologically easier than confronting reality. And every month that passed, that trap grew stronger. Today we see similar patterns everywhere. People stay loyal to online tribes, political groups, conspiracy communities, even when evidence began to challenge their belief. But the situation inside Jonestown was about to become worse. Much worse. Then something strange began happening. Jim Jones started holding emergency meetings, sometimes in the middle of the night. Sirens would sound, followers would gather, tension filled the air. Then Jones would deliver terrifying news. Enemies were coming. The community was under threat. Disaster was near. Sometimes members were told they might have died for the cause. Sometimes they were told armed attackers were approaching. Again and again, the community was pushed into states of fear and uncertainty. And after hours of emotional intensity, the threat would suddenly disappear. The crisis had passed, or so they were told. These events became known as White Nights, and they served a purpose few followers fully understood, which raised perhaps the most disturbing question yet. Why do people obey authority figures, even when their demands become extreme? The answer would be uncovered hundreds of miles away, inside the psychology laboratory, and it would reveal something terrifying about human nature. For years, Jim Jones had been preparing them, not for life, for obedience, and that difference would change everything. The White Nights weren't random, they weren't emotional outbursts, they were rehearsals, psychological rehearsals. Each crisis taught them the same lesson. Trust Jim Jones, trust the group, distrust anyone else. Over time, those lessons became automatic. And that's what makes the next question so uncomfortable. Why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't someone stand up and say, "This is insane"? Why didn't people refuse? Why didn't they walk away? In the early 1960s, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram wanted to answer a disturbing question. How could ordinary people participate in terrible acts? Were they fundamentally different? Or were they just following orders? To find out, Milgram invited ordinary people into a laboratory, people with no history of violence. They were told to administer electric shocks to another participant whenever that participant answered incorrectly. The shocks appeared to become stronger and stronger. Soon the participant screamed, pleaded, begged. Eventually, he appeared to stop responding altogether. And yet, many participants continued. Not because they enjoyed it, not because they were cruel, but because an authority figure calmly told them, please, continue.
Continue, please. Yeah, go on.
Of course, the participants were not actually receiving real electric shock. It was an experiment. The person in room was not another participant, but an assistant working with the experimenter, and there was no real danger involved. But the impact point remained the same. When people believe they are following a legitimate authority, many are willing to continue actions they would normally question. Milgram's conclusion terrified the world. Under the right conditions, ordinary people can do extraordinary things, not because they lose their humanity, but because they had our responsibility. Think about modern life. A boss asks employees to do something questionable. A political leader asks supporters to ignore uncomfortable facts. And influencers tell followers whom to trust and whom to hate. Most people imagine they would resist. Milgram suggested otherwise, and inside Jonestown, those same forces were operating every day. But obedience alone wasn't enough. Something else was happening. Something even deeper. Because by 1978, Jim Jones wasn't merely leading a community. For many followers, he had become reality itself. And when reality depends on one person, challenging that person becomes almost impossible. Then everything started falling apart. In November 1978, a US congressman named Leo Ryan arrived in Guyana. He wanted to investigate reports coming from concerned families. Stories of abuse, control, fear. People back home wanted answers. At first, Jonestown looked peaceful, smiling faces, organized tours, friendly conversations. Everything appeared normal, but appearance can be deceptive. Because that night, a note was secretly passed to a visiting journalist, a desperate message, a cry for help. One sentence changed everything. Please, leave us out of here. Suddenly the illusion cracked. Several members announced they wanted to leave. And for the first time, the outside world saw evidence that something was terribly wrong. Which raised another question. Why was leaving so dangerous? The answer lies in what happens when leaders begin to see disagreement as betrayal. For years, Jim Jones had taught his followers that enemies were everywhere. The government, the media, critics, outsiders. Anyone who challenged the movement became a threat. And once a group believes criticism equals danger, silencing critics starts feeling justified. History has shown this pattern again and again. Political movements, religious movements, revolutions, online communities. The moment disagreement becomes treason, danger accelerates. When Leo Ryan and the defectors attempted to leave, armed followers confronted them at the nearby airstrip. Gunfire erupted. Several people were killed, including Congressman Ryan. It was a point of no return. The outside world would soon know the illusion was collapsing. And Jim Jones knew it. Back in Jonestown, everyone was called together. Families gathered. Children sat beside parents. The atmosphere was tense, heavy, uncertain. Recording from that day still exist, and they revealed something haunting. Jim Jones did not present death as a defeat, he presented it as a choice, a final act of loyalty, a final act of resistance, a final act of purpose.
Because we are not committing suicide, it's a revolutionary act.
For years he had shaped reality. Now he was shaping its conclusion. Some followers protested.
As an individual, I have a right.
Some argued, some cried, but many stayed.
If you tell us we have to give our lives now, we're ready.
And that led us to perhaps the most important question in the entire story. Why? Why did they remain? Psychologist Henry Touchfield discovered something profound. People don't simply belong to groups. Groups become part of their identity, their sense of self, their understanding of reality, their understanding of right and wrong. By 1978, Jonestown wasn't just where many followers lived, it was who they were. Their friends were there, their purpose was there, their future was there. Their entire social world existed there. Living wasn't just leaving a place, it meant destroying an identity. And sometimes, people will defend an identity long after they stop defending a belief. Think about today, how difficult it is for someone to leave a political tribe, an online community, a belief system, a social circle. Even when doubts appear, the larger the identity, the harder the exit. Jonestown was that principle taken to its most tragic extreme. For decades, people have asked, how could they do it? How could they believe him? How could they stay? How could they reach that final day? But maybe those questions contain a hidden assumption. The assumption that the people of Jonestown were fundamentally different from us, that they were weaker, more gullible, more naive. History suggested something far more uncomfortable. They wanted what every human being wants: purpose, meaning, belonging, certainty, community. The same things that drive people today. The same things that drive you, the same things that drive me. And that's what makes Jonestown terrifying. Not because it reveals what strange people can do, because it reveals what ordinary people can do. Under the right circumstances, under the right pressures, under the right illusions. The tragedy of Jonestown wasn't just that 909 people died from cyanide poisoning. The tragedy was that most of them believed they were building a better future. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: the psychological forces that led them there didn't die in the jungle. They still exist. In movements, in communities, in politics, in social media, in workplaces, in friendships, and sometimes inside ourselves.